Hey everybody! In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a few more advanced features with Tell Me When, how to do things such as create a meta icon and what they do. So, as you know, my profile has a lot of stuff in it. Looking at it just as its basic value, you can see that it looks fairly simple. Everything is centralized, there's a few buttons, but when you actually open up Tell Me When, you'll notice that there's a lot more going on in the background. Making a button that can turn off borders or stop certain icons from appearing is a lot more complex than it initially seems. So, what you see when you open Tell Me When are all the background information, but it's all hidden to you when you're actually playing. I'm going to show you in this video how to do exactly that. How to create hidden icons that can instead transmit their data into meta icons elsewhere in the profile. Now, first off, if you already have a profile and you want to restart, you can simply go to the General tab and we can enter a new name. In this case, I'll do Paladin, let's say, how-to video. Just so that everyone can see that this is a new profile. Go ahead and press enter and the profile will not be erased. Instead, we have switched to a different profile, which gives us our base groups. Now you've noticed probably that these global groups are still here. That's because these are separate from any profile group as they are global and affect everything. But we can choose that they don't appear when we are in this profile by clicking this button on the group settings. We can do this for the remaining global groups and all of them will hide and we can continue editing as we normally would. Now, as I've shown you in a previous video, I'll just go over it again really quickly. Creating an icon is as simple as right-clicking any empty icon you see and you get to the icon settings. There you can choose from a drop-down menu what you want this icon to do. Let's go ahead and choose spell cooldown, and we'll go ahead and track a pretty generic spell cooldown for red, in this case Crusader Strike. It'll make a list appear on the right side, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but blue colored spells are actually activated spell abilities in the game. All the other icons are a lot of hidden spells and other things. You can also just check which one you need by the spell ID, and right-clicking will enter it, or you can left-click and it'll put the name of the spell. The name is useful if you don't really know which spell ID, but otherwise I would try and stick to spell IDs as much as possible. Pressing enter will cause the spell to appear, and that's our basic spell cooldown. If we go ahead and exit Tell Me When and hit this target dummy in front of me, you'll see it acts exactly like you'd expect. Shows us how many stacks we have, and once it's not on cooldown, it will go ahead and hide. Now, I'm going to go ahead and set this to 100% while it's on cooldown. We'll add a timer, we'll add the timer text, and we'll make it so it displays the global cooldown as well. And there we go. We have a fully functioning spell cooldown. It'll go ahead and tell us when we can use it, we can adjust the settings as much as we need to, and it'll appear where we need it to be. Now, this is usually enough if you need one spell cooldown, but if we were trying to build a rotation, obviously there's going to be more. We're going to need a few extra spells, so we'll copy this here. We'll make this Blade of Justice, and we'll do the same. We'll go ahead, add Judgment in. And the reason I'm copying is to retain all the settings I set before. And finally, Templar's Verdict, just for a finisher. And I know that this isn't really so much a spell cooldown, but we'll just leave the icon there, just to make things easy. Now, we have our 4 buttons here, but as you see, we're going to have to do a bit more to get these to appear in order. So what we're going to do is create a new profile group, and we're going to reduce this to just one icon. You can do that just by reducing the columns and rows down to 1. And this one, when we right-click it, we're going to set this to a meta icon, which is the final option on the list. And we'll get this eyeball icon that appears in the center of our screen. So clicking this, what this meta icon does is it takes data from other icons and displays them in a sort of priority list. We can add icons to it and search through them by using these lists, as you see here, and adding a couple more, we can add all of them into here. And what this has done is it's created a priority list where we have Crusader Strike on top and Templar's Verdict on the bottom. We can also right-click and drag icons and say Add to Meta Icon, which will place it on the bottom of the list, and we can delete it if we don't mean to do that. We can also move things around by left-clicking any of their data information on the bar and dragging it where we need it to be, and we can replace their position by right-clicking and having it swap, just in case you want something to go to the top and something to go to the bottom. So what does this do? Well, it makes a meta icon appear. Now, for our standard icons, where we're tracking cooldowns, because this icon is also visible while the cooldown is active, it's going to stay at the top of the list. So what we're going to need to do is first change all these opacities back to 0 when the icon is not available. And once we do this, we'll have a very standard, nothing special rotation right there in the center of our screen. So Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, and so on. Now obviously this isn't perfect, it's just trying to do whatever it can, and it's not going to be accurate as we didn't really put that many conditions in. The other issue is that we still see these icons on the top left here. We don't really need to see them, we have them displaying in the meta icon. So we'll centralize this, and what we can do is we can right click and go to Always Hide, which is under Custom Texture. This does not take into consideration whether it's active or not, this simply tells it to not appear on screen. All the other conditions for it to appear would work as normal. So we would set up a normal icon, click Always Hide, and there we go. We have a rotation, maced in a meta icon. All of its data is being pulled from another group of icons, which we can't see while we're actually playing. But us, as the person who made this, we would know right off the bat where all this information is coming from, and therefore we could very easily pull it back in and make sure we can use it properly. Now you can go ahead and expand it by right-clicking this section here and pull it down, left, and you can add as many icons as you want and pull them into the meta icon, and you can have this meta icon as long and as complicated as you need it to be. So if we were to add Wake of Ashes to the rotation, which we'll do, we'll set it up the same way as the other icons, right-click and drag it, add it to the meta. Now, Wake of Ashes and Templar's Verdict, we're going to just quickly add the Holy Power requirement for this so this works properly. Greater than 3. When we are setting up our meta icon, because Templar's Verdict and Wake of Ashes realistically are high in the priority, we can just drag them to the top of the list. Their location in the group where they are doesn't matter. We can just go ahead and sort it like this. I personally try and sort the group in the same order just so it makes sense to me. But again, leaving it, we now have what would be a near fully perfect rotation. This will go ahead and manage our Holy Power so that it'll only show Templar's Verdict when it makes sense to, and otherwise it'll show the spells based on their priorities. And if in the future priorities change, as they normally do, we can always come back to this and readjust the priorities as much as we need simply by dragging the spells around the list. It gets a bit more complicated as you add conditions for spells and you want to do things such as the predictive rotations, which I've done, because now you have interlinking conditions and that's why you have to be a bit more careful. But for a basic priority list with just a handful of spells that have very basic conditions, this is a way easier method of making it so you can have that information display for you. So we'll go ahead and shrink this back down to where we want it to be. Now, this doesn't just have to be for those kinds of cooldowns. You can have a whole bunch of different ways to use meta icons. So let's go ahead and try creating another meta icon. This one is going to be for Avenging Wrath. So again, we'll create a meta icon. We'll go ahead, we'll add another group, and we'll put this group off to the side. Now, for Avenging Wrath, because this one, we want to see its cooldown, when we choose spell cooldown, we're going to put in the spell as we normally would, and we're going to go ahead and increase the opacity from for the not ready to 100%, and we're not going to tick the global cooldown, because we don't need that information. This, drag it into our meta icon, and we're good to go. So now, when we go ahead and use it, you'll see that the spell cooldown being drawn from the other icons on the left side. I'm going to also set these up to hidden. Another thing you can do if you want all icons in this group to be hidden is go to the group settings, go to the bottom, and just lower the opacity of the group. If you lower that to hidden, it'll go ahead and work the same way as Always Hide. It's an easier way of making it so that all groups stay hidden at all times. You don't have to worry about it. Now, using Avenging Wrath, we'll see that the cooldown will trigger, but we will not see that the buff duration is active, because we didn't set it up that way. Right now, it's strictly showing the cooldown. If you wanted to see the buff active, we could set it up that way, but what we would need to do is go back into Tell Me When. We would create another icon. The icon this time will be for the buff tracking. We'll go ahead and select buff tracking. We'll type in the Avenging Wrath buff, select it from our list, and we're going to set it so that it shows the timer and the timer numbers, but we do not want this to appear when the button is inactive. We'll go ahead and add it as an icon shown, and when we click the Avenging Wrath cooldown button, we'll set it so that while the buff is not active, display the cooldown. While the buff is active, it'll display that instead. We can drag that into our meta icon, and while there are 2 icons listed here, only one of them will show at a time. We can set that up for any icon that has any sort of cooldown duration, that use that for protection. You could use it for Guardian of Ancient Kings, or even for other classes. Any spell that has a buff associated with it, that's how you would track both the buff and the spell. Now, if we're just going to go ahead and track talents, let's say we wanted a single meta icon to track 2 different talents that are on the same row. In this case, Consecrate and Wake of Ashes are shared in their row for their talents. So if we go ahead and add a condition to each of these spell icons that the talent is learned, in this case Wake of Ashes for its cooldown, and Consecration for this one, what we can do is, much like what we just did for Avenging Wrath, we can put those 2 icons into a single icon meta group, which we'll create right here. And once we do that, the moment that the conditions change for a spell, it'll show whichever one is currently able to appear. Now, again, it's important to make sure that only one of them can appear, otherwise they'll both get a little confused. But switching off of Wake of Ashes, it'll switch to Consecration. And of course, switching back to Wake of Ashes would do the same. So, with all that being said, you now have a fully functioning meta icon that takes all of its data from other groups and other sources. You have now the ability to track buffs onto a single location instead of having to make a robust central area where all of this would be set. Now you'll see Wake of Ashes in the center, and that's because we didn't add a talent ability to that icon when we were creating the rotation. So, as always, it is very important to make sure your conditions are correct. You can go ahead and add in as many conditions as you need to, and you can resize these meta icons and place them around wherever you'd like them to be, so you can create that add-on appearance as much as you like. You can also anchor these to each other, you can do anything you'd like, and it'll make it so you have a much cleaner overall appearance for all of your groups. You're also not just limited to icons. You can go ahead and do this with bars as well. The bars will... I typically like using 1 bar. You can go ahead and turn the icon off for the bar if you prefer to, so it's just the bar, but you will not be able to add other icons that are icons as a meta. So by clicking this, we set this to a meta icon. If you were to trying to drag, let's say, the Avenging Wrath buff to here, the option to add to meta does not appear. That's because you cannot have information from an icon transmit into a bar. That being said, if we had another bar that was tracking that information, in this case Avenging Wrath, we'll set this to a buff, and oh, you know what, let's do Holy Power. If this was tracking Holy Power and we wanted this information to instead be part of a separate group, we would do that, and now by exiting this, you'll see that the Holy Power information has been transmitted. So, you can do so much with this if you put your mind to it, and as always, if you have any questions, you can always leave me a message at chesder.com/contacts. I hope you guys find this information useful, and I will catch you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.